Senator Monday Okwebolo, the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, APC, has emerged victorious in the Edo State governorship election held on Saturday. According to the results from 18 local government areas and announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission on Sunday, Okwebolo secured a total of 291,667 votes. His closest rival, Asue Ighodalo of the People's Democratic Party, garnered 247,655 votes. Meanwhile, the outgoing governor of Edo State, Governor Godwin Obaseki, says the PDP will use democratic means to seek justice. Joining us now for a review of the just concluded election in Edo State is Liborous Oshoma, an indigene of Edo State, lawyer and human rights activist. He's joined by James Ugochukwu, one of the civil society observers at the just concluded Edo governorship election. Ugochukwu is the Executive Director, Alliance for Inclusive Development Aid Africa. Good morning to you both, and thanks for joining us today, post-Edo elections 2024.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start with you, Liborous.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Since you are with us in the studio here. Okay. Did your party win? The election has been described as peaceful, but was it free and fair?
Peaceful.
And the same question to you, to James Ugochukwu. You were an observer, Aid Africa, on the ground, Yaga Africa, Electoral, many groups on the ground, Nigeria Situation Room. I've seen some of the reports, but what will be your reflection in terms of the conduct of INEC and the other institutional stakeholders involved in that election, political parties, the security agencies, INEC, and all the gladiators? But let's start with Liborous Oshoma, who is a stakeholder in the matter as an Edo State indigene.
I was listening to Comrade Philip Shaibu saying, his votes were organic. And that's why I'm laughing, because we know in that election, most of the votes were not organic votes. They were votes that were purchased. Like Rufai said, the two major political parties, what you call the two gladiators, it was obvious that they shared money, they bought votes, right in the presence of security agencies that looked the other way while party were busy. It was a free day. In Edo North, for example, even some party agents abandoned their party because of money. And so you see where politicians will weaponize poverty, they impoverish the people, and then on the election day, that same money that is not available, you see it deployed to purchase votes for election. And then they come out to say, yes, it was the love. And that's why when they tell you that we made this person...
On the ground? Did you see
I have brothers and sisters, I have relations, I was getting videos.
So this is
and
hearsay.
Yes, but with the benefit of telephony these days, FaceTime, real time, you can say that even though you were not there, just like you in the studio, you have a reporter on ground who is giving you video evidence of what is happening. It's almost as good as you are there. And so these videos and, live feeds of, you're on call with people who are on ground, because this is my area, I'm from Edo North. And so people are showing you how people are buying votes, and then you're given a piece of paper. You go, you vote, show them who you voted for, and then you go to the van and collect your money.
Security agencies were there.
Right in the presence of security agencies. So, and that's one. So in assessing the conduct and then the, the institutions that participated in the election. And then for INEC, the late arrival of materials consistently, failure of the beavers, and coupled with the state of bad roads. Bad roads I can excuse because INEC already know that the roads were bad. And so I had expected a situation where you see, electoral officers looking for Okada to convey polling materials. It was very bad. But unfortunately, politicians did what they are used to doing. And typical in 2020, APC was the one at the receiving end and crying at this time that, there were irregularities in some areas and massive rigging. Today, the shoe is on the other foot. Obaseki also... what Philip Shaibu also said, Obaseki didn't manage his political fortune very well. So that's why it was like a referendum, you know, on Obaseki, and the traditional politicians, you know, that he pushed out of the bus, ganged up against him, and they had a free day, you know, outbuying him in the election.
Well, James Ugochukwu, Aid Africa's preliminary observations. I don't know whether you have issued your final report, but what did you observe?
Okay. Yes, we are going to release our final report today by 3:45 p.m. later today, because we'll be waiting to see how the whole thing is going to pan out. And of course, the result has been announced. For us in the civil society, we are more concerned about the process more than whoever is emerging as the winner and something of that nature. I'm talking about the process. Of course, there's knocks and kudos to INEC. Let's start from the knocks, for instance, now. INEC has not been able to demonstrate that funds being expended on them in terms of training, in terms of capacity building to overcome logistic challenges has yielded any fruit. A case in point is that when we are in Oredo local government, because that's where I operated mostly, Oredo, Kwabauka, and some of the other local governments in Edo South, you will discover that right there in the super rack, for instance, in Ogbe Primary School, youth corps members were left stranded as at 8 o'clock in the morning, still waiting to be transported to their different polling units. And the question you'll be asking is that, what kind of logistics did INEC put in place to ensure that these people are taken to the polling unit as at when due, which is 8:30 in the morning? Because by the time you get it wrong in terms of deploying personnel and materials to the polling unit, it affects the entire election day value chain. And that is what always dovetails to late collation of results. Talking about collation of results, for instance, now, most local government areas couldn't collect results because of the excuse there's no power to do that. Okay, now, we expect INEC to make a contingency plan that in case the election dovetails to midnight or so, there should be provision of power for people to be able to collate results with light. And other then coming to the kudos for them now, the Beavers have performed very well in this particular election. The turnaround time of Beavers accreditation is less than 1 minute. And of course, the facial authentication was much more effective than the fingerprint. You know, before the Beavers used to have problem with facial authentication. They will ask you to smile or to paint white powder before it can authenticate you. But this time around, we are able to see that the Beavers perform very well. And then, of course, in terms of IREV, as a record time of 6 p.m. or so, we have about 90-something% of the polling unit results, you know, uploaded in the IREV. So these are the kudos for INEC. But the problem that INEC keep on having, and the weakest link in election day activity, is the collation. It has been a recurrent decimal for too long. INEC will perform very well and they will mess up everything with their collation, because late collation always casts doubt on the credibility of the election. And of course, we are hoping that INEC should look at this particular area and improve on it as we march to Ondo State in November.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ugochukwu. I think it's really important, like you said, not just for this election cycle, but that one day we might get elections right in Nigeria. So with regards to the integrity of elections, I want to ask, when polling starts late, especially when polling agents arrive late, does that cast aspersions on the integrity of that center, especially if there's no obvious reason why materials are not dispatched, or like you mentioned, polling agents are not dispatched, or are not, or the NYSC members are not sent early enough? Does that cast aspersions? We saw live on Arise over the weekend, elderly people sitting under the sun. Some came in the rain, waiting for their polling units to be open. That's one. So does any party benefit from this? The second aspect is I'd like you to speak to voter apathy and voter turnout. What was your observation of this? We had 2.2 million registered Edo people for the elections who collected their PVCs, but how many people actually came out? And what would you say, based on your observation, were some of the reasons why people didn't come out to vote? And then for Mr. Oshoma, I'd like to ask you, did the will of the people prevail over the weekend? I ask because from the people, you know, we had Honorable Philip Shaibu come up and he said the Edo people have spoken. That's what we've seen across board. But was it the people that actually spoke through their votes, or were there other things that might have manipulated the results? I'll start with Mr. Ugochukwu, then Mr. Oshoma next.
So in terms of early arrival of material, like as I said before, it's very, very imperative that the men and material, or personnel and materials of INEC arrive early enough, because the Beavers machine is activated at exactly 8:30 in the morning. So if you operate the Beavers earlier than that, it's not going to work. It starts working by 8:30. Now, this is the thing. If I'm a candidate and this is my particular stronghold and materials are arriving late, it has a way of affecting the number of votes I'm going to obtain, because this is civic duty. Yeah. Even though they are bribing the people to vote, which is in violation of Section 121 of the Electoral Act, most people didn't come there to collect money. So when they wait and the election officials are not coming, they go home. And these are votes lost for whoever that place is the person's stronghold. So the question we'll be asking is that why is it that INEC on election day, where everywhere is locked down and no movement at all, and with all the preparation and arrangement with road transport workers, cannot move material from one point to the other? What is the challenge? So these are the questions INEC need to be telling Nigerians, because these are taxpayers' money that is being used for this election logistics. So INEC need to get this logistics very right, because any late arrival of material in any particular polling unit affects whoever that place is his or her stronghold during the election. Then the other question of turnout is that the turnout is still abysmally low. We have turnout of 24.96%. So out of 2.2 million people that collected their PVC, out of the 2.6 that actually registered, we have only 2.49%. That's about 24.49%. So that's just very, very low, if you ask me. And that gives us worry that people seem not to be believing in the process again. And the people that turn out, they will tell you that, look, I'm just going to see how much they are going to give. So most of the political parties, most of the major political parties, they participated in vote, we call it vote trading, because some are selling and the other people are buying. So the voters sell their PVC and the politicians buy it with some sum or so. And of course, talking about sum now, the price has increased, because we notice that the minimum or the average of the cost of trade now is about 10,000 naira. So talking about weaponizing poverty. So in this era of, pardon?
It was affected by inflation too.
Yes, it's affected by the inflation, and it's affected by every other economic indices you can mention. So at least with 10,000 naira, the person can cook a pot of soup for that night and suffer for the next 4 years. Because we always tell people that once you sell your vote, you sell your voice, and that is why we keep on having bad governance in Nigeria. So the turnout is very low, and of course we are hoping that as we are heading towards those states, the political class, the INEC and other relevant stakeholders will mobilize people to participate in the election, so that very few people will not be determining who gets to the government house. All
right. Thank you. Mr. Oshoma, the will of the people.
In talking about the will of the people, you have to look at all the indices. You know, first and foremost, you look at the parameters for voting, you look at the attitude of security agencies, also look at the politicians, vote trading and the rest before you arrive at the will of the people. Every year we'll say we'll give INEC kudos in some places, give them knocks in some other areas. But the areas we give them kudos is always the same, maybe plus or minus. And then the areas we give them knocks is always the same, logistics and the rest. So when you still have these challenges, and people are not able to, exercise their will. There are some people who ordinarily want to come vote, but they look at the process and say, what's the need? At the end of the day, the will of the people might not prevail. And then you talk about coalition, where you say now there are issues. People are raising issues about overvoting, and despite the fact that results have been posted on the IREV, so when you have all of these plus or minus misgivings, you can't completely say yes, we're talking about the will of the people. And then also a situation where there are no organic voting. Organic in the sense that people come out on their own and say, I'm going to vote for this particular party. And then you get to the police station, you are induced to vote for a different party. It's an offense, but that vote had been induced. So you can't say the people exercise a free will. They have been impoverished. And whether they want to sell or not. In Nigeria of today, you dangle 20,000 naira before somebody who is looking for 2K. Certainly he will sell his conscience. So in all of that, the politicians can sit down and say, whoever wins can say the will of the people prevail because that's their language. The people have spoken, or phone, or bane, or whatever. But in actual sense, can you say in rating democracy an election, the way we know it to be, can you say this is an election properly so-called? It is the way we do it over and over again. At the end of the day, we would talk, and then 4 years down the line, we're still back to the same process. We're talking about IREV. We're talking about transparency. We're talking about the process. Now, IREV is a viewing portal. And a situation where you have number of accredited voters, and then the number of actual voters more than the number of accredited voters. When you get to the tribunal, you will need those information from INEC to prove that there was actually overvoting. Not just registered voters, accredited voters. But INEC, the law also presumed that once INEC declares result, the result is presumed regular, no matter the misgivings, no matter the discrepancies, no matter the vote trading. It is now for you, who is disproving what the law already presumed to be regular, to prove. Meanwhile, the materials are not with you. You will need to go to INEC to get the back end, information. So when you don't need all of these hurdles, that's when we begin to talk about the will of the people prevailing. Yeah.
All right, we need to go on a quick break, so just hold that thought. When we come back, the conversation continues. We're still here reviewing the Edo State elections that took place over the weekend with the APC candidate emerging as winner. Take a short break now. When we return, the conversation continues. You're welcome back. It's still the morning show here on Arise TV, and we have Edo, talking about the Edo State elections, Liborous Oshoma, an indigene of Edo State, lawyer and human rights activist, as well as James Ugochukwu, one of the civil society observers at the just concluded Edo governorship election, as well as executive director for Alliance for Inclusive Development. Just before the break, we're going over some of the things that happened over the weekend. Rufai.
Real quickly, let's talk about the Fintiri coalition results declaration. Legal implications. It's not the first time this has happened in the country where people are announcing results even before the final declaration. What's your take on that? Secondly, I also like to come to you, Mr. Ugochukwu, to ask, is it not an indictment on democracy itself that since we return to the process year in, year out, voter apathy keeps increasing? In the early 2000s, people came up more for those elections than what we have today. Even in the presidential elections, still the 25 to 29% mark. So it shows that it's not really, whoever emerges is never the will of the generality of the people. Because in a state of about 3.54 million people, about 2.2, half of the state population have voters' card. They pick up their cards. But out of that, now 29%, less than 600,000 of those people get to vote. You can't say that's an absolute representation of the will of the people. And that has been the order of our elections. People are losing faith in our democracy, yes or no, and how can we ameliorate that? But I'll come to you as regards Mr. Fintiri. I'll also come to you as regards the case of the IREV. Results finally on the IREV does not tally. This was the same IREV they said is supposed to show us where we are going, a vote rigging machine. And also, the fact that Obaseki was told to go out of that coalition center, the fact that they changed the general coalition center from the local government coalition centers and they pushed it to general coalition units. All of those back and that was the point Fintiri made, that this is not me violating the electoral law, that it is INEC violating the electoral law. But what he did, are we going to condemn it, yes or no?
Yeah, Fintiri, I don't expect, let me start from the Fintiri, and then because of time, I'll try and run through all of their questions, because it's like a hydra-headed question molded into one. Fintiri, I don't expect somebody in the mode of Fintiri to be doing that, because it is the same Adamawa where an INEC resident electoral commissioner is being prosecuted for daring to announce results while he's not constitutionally empowered to so do. So Fintiri should not, no matter the grievance, there are, like Obaseki has said, there are constitutional means of ventilating your grievance. All you need to do is to sit down with your team. I talked about the issue of accredited voters. We saw it happen in Oshoma. The number of accredited voters by the beavers. You juxtapose them with the number of actual voters. And in any place where there is overvoting simply means number of actual voters, number of accredited voters, number of actual voters more than the number of accredited voters. So INEC will automatically cancel those results, or the tribunal will do that. So what they ought to have done is to take the legal and constitutional means of ventilating instead of going to now truncate the process. And on the issue of change of collation centers, I do not think that there is a law that says this thing is cast in stone, because we know politicians. In situations where we've even seen where tribunals are moved from their area of jurisdiction to Abuja. So if there are challenges, if INEC, can explain to parties, or there are apparent challenges or threats to why they should not collate results in a particular place, they can move it to a safer place. But INEC needs to be fair and carry everybody along. But also on the issue of voters' apathy, the numbers reducing, it is not just about INEC. It also has to do with the people, the governance structures that we have. We can't sit down and pretend that both local government, state government, and the federal government have been, Eldorado have been fantastic. You look at some of the infrastructures.
Terrible.
Very terrible. You look at some of the infrastructures in the state, and then when you hear governors celebrate the renovation of a secretariat, you see governors celebrate construction of road, and you ask yourself, these are issues that, other countries have overcome. Poverty, they've overcome poverty. And here we are celebrating eradication of poverty. So people over the time will ask themselves, at the end of the day, 4 years, you vote for this person, 4 years, there's nothing to show for it. So that also encourages apathy. And then we need to sit down and ask ourselves, do we really want to copy this Western-style democracy, or we want something
entirely? Is it really working?
Is it working for us? If it is not working, then let's sit down as a people, talk, and then fashion a way that will work for us, that is peculiar to us. Instead of this idea of, every year you give hope, you raise high hopes, and then a few persons, you have like you said, out of the total number of registered voters, we're not even talking of everybody that registered, those eligible to vote. But mind you, not everybody that registered is resident in the state also. There are some people who are like us, who feel they don't have the money to travel all the way. So we should also have a way to include those people who want to participate in the process. Just like American election is coming, they're already talking about voters in Nigeria. Voters, American voters in other countries. But here in election, you lock down the state, you still can't go home to participate in the process. And whoever wins says it's victory for democracy. And while the loser will look for a way to empower or pay lawyers to go to tribunal, and that nothing ever comes out of it. We need to, at some point, something will have to give if we continue in this cycle.
Ugochukwu, victory for democracy or sad times for democracy?
I think if you ask me, is victory for everything crazy except democracy? Because if you are looking at democracy, it said government for the people, by the people, and for the people. So now the question is, if you have 2.2 million registered voters, 2.4 million registered voters, and 2.2 collecting their PVC, and at the end of the day, 500 and something thousand came out. That is not the voice of the people speaking. That is abysmally low, 24.96% turnout. It's abysmally low, and I can situate this party to three things. One, fear of violence. At least for the first time, I'm very glad that we're not counting ballot and dead bodies, because previously in the election, we'll be counting how many people that were shot, how many people that died, and In fact, people that capsize as a result of trying to, perform their civic duty. So fear of violence have already made a lot of people to avoid going to the polling units. In fact, one of my friends told me that, he's in Abuja here, told me that he has told all his family members to lock their gate, that they should not go out. There's going to be serious violence. But to thank God, there was very, very low incidence of violence during this election. Then the next thing that makes people to have this apathy is the perception that their votes don't count. So a situation whereby at the end of the voting process, people will start protesting that their vote didn't count, or as we have the incidence of a polling official recording 230-something accredited voters and the 400-something valid voters. That is a big shame in terms of the training that INEC is giving to its ad hoc officials. That is vote manipulation of the highest order, and of course, they should put that kind of person in line with Section 120 of the Electoral Act. The other point is the evidence of the dividend of democracy. As we have said, 25 years down the line, we don't have one single refinery working in the whole country. They keep on telling us that the refinery is going to work and everything. And that has brought serious energy crisis to the country. From the inception of democracy till now, what we are having is increment in the pump price of fuel. And we know that everything in Nigeria rises and falls on energy. Most people were not able to participate in this election because they can't move around. So in all this, we should be looking at Nigerians leveraging this Supreme Court ruling of local government autonomy and ensure that we start redefining our democracy from bottom up, because so far democracy still remains the best form of government. I don't think we want to go back to the military era, but I think we need to start retooling the democracy and, of course, building the capacity of citizens at the grassroots level to start holding their councillor to local government chairman up to the president accountable for
Mr. Ugochukwu,
what
would you say about some people? Somebody just sent me a message, was saying that maybe it's because now that we're using technology, we're just knowing the real number of voters. That before, when we had no technology, people were just padding numbers of people that came out to vote.
True.
That maybe it's because of the technology now, that's why we're seeing the real nature, that there's always been massive level of voter apathy before now. What do you say to that as we wrap up quickly?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the person has some level of truth about that, because technology is exposing everything now. We saw everything that happened in the field, and of course, what we are seeing in terms of the computation and all that, I think is something that needs to be recomputed again, because the level of turnout and everything is not tallying really. All right.
Well, thank you so much.
I want to say something.
We're out
quickly.
of time. You have 20 seconds.
Yes.
20.
You find out before Jega, the electoral register was filled with fictitious name. And that time, what we had was just ballot vote stuffing. That's where you hear landslide and mudslide. So now with technology, you know the actual number. So what we need to do is to relook at our figures. This population figure that we keep bandy, 250 million, 300 million. There's need for us to sit down and actually know the numbers.
So on our path to progress, it's just a bit slow.
Yes, it's too slow.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Liborous, Oshoma, of course, to Mr. James Ugochukwu from our Abuja studio. Good conversation this morning, and the conversation doesn't end. We'll continue to evaluate throughout the day here on Horizon.